So I'm going to build a quick project with Express Generator that has an API and a front end. The front end will ping the back end and get data. And if you have any questions, just ask them. Okay. I think that the Express Generator is a good place to start. You can go to the Express homepage and find it here. The basic instructions are listed, and you can use it with npx. So go ahead and close these, and I'm going to cd into my sites folder where I've got just a single folder. And so per their instructions, I'm going to use the Express Generator, and I'm going to install the view engine will be handlebars. Okay, so an example of that will look like, yeah. So npx Express Generator, and then the view engine will be view HBS. I just need to check my instructions here. It's in the right. And if you add a folder name, then it'll build it all in that project. So I'm just going to call this sample API. So npx Express Generator, handlebars will be the view, and sample API will be the project folder. It's going to install everything, and then I should see. Wait a second here. Oh, I guess it doesn't like the single V. Let me try it using the -- view. Yeah, there we go. So, so it's like this, this is the project that I'm referencing. So I'll cd into my sample and install the dependencies, as they say here, and I'll go ahead and put this into Slack so you can see it as well. And great, and so now I'm going to use code period to open this up in VS Code, but that's not installed. Hold on. VS Code command line tools. To install that, you run I guess you have to install it from VS Code first. Oh, okay. So on a Mac, if you want to be able to do that, you have to type, you have to open the command palette in VS Code. So I need a new project in there, and then I can do the command palette, and then I can type. Command palette was Shift Command P, and now I can type in the command line. Oh, shell. It's a shell command. And so this will install the code command at your current path, and you have to give it permission. then once you do this, you can type code period, and it'll open your current folder inside of VS Code as a project. Okay. Excellent. So we can see in our node modules, we've installed the entire, we installed everything. So all of these are built in and installed. And we can see in our package that we can just call it npm start, and it should start up the project in the bin file. And I'm just going to verify. So the Express Generator application actually suggests you run with the debug tool, and I'll go ahead and do that because I think it makes it kind of simple. And so I'm going to write this inside of Visual Studio Code terminal. So debug equals sample API. That's like a identifier for debugging, colon, asterisk, but then I use nodemon and start. And this will restart it when I make changes. Cool, so now it's listening, and we can go and look and just verify that it's all running. And there it is. All right, any questions so far? Okay. So this is their sample project, and you can see it's using handlebars. Handlebars is a very simple templating engine. You have a layout, and then you have these kind of partial files. And so the layout, you load the layout, and then you can insert data when you render the layout, and you can also render one of these partial files. And so if we look for the word index, we'll see inside of the index.js route that it renders index. So it's rendering the index file, and then setting one of the variables using, so express will equal title. And so, and it's set up to use the layout always. It's going to be set inside of app in here. So the view engine is set to handlebars. Cool. So the routes are we have a simple route called index, and another one called users, and everything inside of users is going to be at this URL /users, right? And so so this is the kind of like the root, and so when it says root here, that means that it's what's available at the root location. So if I wanted to add a new route, I can simply just copy and paste the existing route, write hello, change the title to hello, and refresh, or go to the hello route, and there it is. Hello, hello, hello. So that variable that's passed here, title, is rendered inside of using the index file and the layout. So that's why it's here, and that's why it appears twice in the body. Okay, so let's make an API now. So if we want to look, if you look for users, you'll see that inside, so here's the user's routes, and then the user routes are loaded in as a whole routes file. And you can see that they are loaded using require. This is the ES5. It's not the import, export, and default. It's the old school ES5 method with require. So if we wanted to add a new route to this, a new set of routes, we could call this the API router. And then we'll name the file API. and then everything that we make in there will be underneath the API, the API path. So this will be the root path for everything that's a route that's inside of the API. So I hit save, and it crashed because it can't find that API file. So I'm going to duplicate, I'll duplicate users. Copy paste, there we go. Rename to API. Okay, so now it's not mad because that exists. And, but currently it's not actually an API. It's not sending JSON, so we need to make it send JSON, and we actually need an object there. So just gonna say message, hello. Hit refresh, come back over here, API, and so there's the root API path or endpoint. Okay, so let's make an API that actually returns something. So I'll make a new endpoint, and I'm going to, let's make something that just changes the color, that returns like a random color. So I'm going to say actually let's do function random color, and then I'm going to say return, and a color, we're just going to return a hex value. Actually, let's return an RGB value. So I'll return those as an array with 3 indices, and each one is going to be a number between 0 and 255. Times 255. So that will give me a number between 0 and 255. And then I can comma, comma. Cool, so now we're gonna get an array, and we can then in the random color one, so now it's gonna be called color, API/color, because it's the API routes. And I'm going to just say that the color is, and I will just call random color right there. And because it's fast, it will be synchronous and it will turn right away. So let's go test this. So API/color. All right, so every time we refresh this, we should get a new color. Cool. Any questions so far? Okay. So it's worth noting that so far this is only a backend project, right? There's nothing in here that you can load or view without this project running, like it is down here with either npm or node, some kind of thing that starts it up. Right? So this project has to be running. The second that I come down here and quit, whoops, sorry, keyboard has an extra key. The second I come down here and do this, everything breaks, right? And so to publish this, you couldn't publish this on GitHub. You would have to publish this on your own server or another server, like a cloud server, like Vercel, right? Okay. Even though it does provide a front end, by dynamically rendering the views, it's still entirely running, depending on the backend. And it's worth also noting that if I look at one of the views, that if I inspect it and look at the code, or just look at this, that all of the content is entirely rendered on the backend. There's no JavaScript running at all. There's a style sheet, but there's no JavaScript running at all on the front end of this project. All of this content is rendered in the back end and sent as just a plain text HTML file to the front end, and the browser renders that. Okay, so inevitably, if you want to build some kind of interactivity or an app on the front end, you have to add JavaScript there. So we can take their queue, which is to use the public folder as the root folder for all of the static files. And so they don't have any JavaScripts in here, but they do have a style sheet, and it's very simple. It looks like this. And so let's add a JavaScript in here, and I'm just going to call it main.js. And even though these are the same files, they're plain text files with a JavaScript JS extension, and I can copy and paste code between them. Almost all basic JavaScript code will work. For example, in the API, this function, this is a pure JavaScript function. This would work just as well in the front end as it would work in the back end. I just happened to put it in the back end for this demonstration. So okay, cool. So let's add a button to our view, to our index view, that will retrieve a color. Okay. So I'll just say button, and I'm gonna say get color. All right. Or let's say update color, because I'm going to change the background with it. So we need to add a listener to this button in our main file, and you can do this several ways. I'm going to add an ID, and I'm just going to give it a unique ID, update color. And if I refresh, we can see that it exists, but there's nothing happening yet. So in the main file, before we include the main file, before we add content to the main file, let's update our layout. See, our layout has a link with the style sheet at the top, but it's not including the JavaScript at the bottom. So script, and the source is going to equal, and we'll use the /first / JavaScripts and main.js. And I'll just make sure that that's all working with an alert, and come back here and refresh, and there it is. So we know that it's working. We can see that it's being included. It executed some JavaScript, so we're ready to rock. Okay, so now the first thing we have to do is select the button, and then add the listener, and then write the callback or handler function that happens after somebody clicks the button. So I'm going to use document.query selector, which is lets you select any object on the page, and was it update color? All right. Whoops. Sorry. I have a. So it's going to be color button equals, right? So document.query selector is an expression. It will look for a selector, any CSS selector works, on the page, and it will return a reference to it. And this reference is, if we look at it in the console, this reference is it's going to be a node. This is it's a reference to the live node of the page. So this button update color ID is a reference to this live node. So we can access all these listeners and functions and properties once we do that. So now we have a reference to it, and we can do, and you can see this, it's add event, ignore that. I thought we could see it, but we couldn't. So we'll say color button dot add event listener. I'm wondering why that's not appearing. And the kind of listener we want is a click listener. And then we have to add a callback function. And so I'll just say, I'll use the fat arrow syntax. which looks like that. And I will also add an E so I can access the event data on the event. And I'll just console log the value of the event object that we receive when a user clicks on it. So refresh, click on the button, and now we can see that a pointer event was received, and we've got all this detail. Information about the mouse and the target and the source element and other things, right? Cool. So we actually want to fetch data from the back end. So let's use the fetch function, and we're going to say fetch. And even though this is running on the front end, right, we still have to reference the API. So we're going to say localhost fetch from http://localhost:3000 API. I'm going to leave it at that, and then I'm going to say, and so this returns a promise. A promise allows you to chain different responses. So we're going to say then the result of the request is going to be stored in this object called data, and I'm going to wrap that so that it's prettier. Okay, and then I'm just going to log what was received. So I refresh, hit update color, and so now we've got a response object that fetch has pinged this URL, and once this is asynchronous, so once that happens and the data is returned, then whatever is returned will be stored in data that we can then access in this curly brace. So we can see that this is actually a full response object. This is not the data we're looking for. It has the headers, it has the response status. So we know that, that the response is a 200, that it was an okay response, that it didn't fail. And then we have to somehow extract the body out of there. And so rather than try to look through the object, we're going to do it the cleanest way, which is that we're going to take the response object, and I'm going to rename this to response, and then we're going to return response. And when we do that, that means that the next then, we can then access the response data. But we actually want to convert this response to JSON at this point so that we can then pull the body or the data that was responded out. So I'm going to say response.json. Oops. And so this is a method that converts the response object to readable JSON. It removes the references to whether or not it was okay and all that other stuff. And so at this point, we have now we have the data. So we can say, do the same curly brace, and we can log just the data at this point. So when I run this and hit update color, now we've got just the response that is the same as this. So we're just getting that object and basically deserializing it. It's been serialized so it could go across the network, even though it's local. But as far as the browser is concerned, it's going across the network because it's using the HTTP protocol. So cool. So now let's change it to get the color. And so now nothing else changes. We're just hitting a different endpoint. I hit refresh, and now we're getting the color. And because we've converted this to JSON, data now just has everything that we need. And remember that in our API, we said that we're returning the whole object, and there's a property called color. So now we have to say if we want the color out, we have to say data.color, and if we log that, we will see the color each time. So let's take that one step further, and besides logging it, let's just update the background. So I think we can say body.style.background color equals, oh, now this I don't know how to do. I'm gonna have to Google this one. Background color, you know what, I'm just gonna try. Can I just do RGB? And it's a string because it's all CSS. So RGB, and I'll just try some numbers first to make sure this works. No, that didn't work. Document, not nice file. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to use the backticks, which means I can do string literals in here. So I can say RGB, parentheses, and then I can say $, curly brace, data.color, 0, and then I can just repeat that, comma. Cool. So now I hit refresh, and every time I should get a new color, although something's wrong. The shade is changing, but I'm still getting, I think I'm doing something wrong. Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. Let's change that to 1 and that to 2. There we go. There we go. So yeah, again, this is it's a really simple example, but again, this data is coming from the back end. We're using it in the front end. And this is just a really simple kind of use of this. There's one more point I'm going to add in here, and you can chain other response handlers. This one's called catch. And catch is when you have an error. And so it's a good idea to always have this in your project, any response, because you might have forgotten to start your server. So so this would be a good example. So I'm going to say console error, and just log the error so that I can see. And then I'm gonna shut the server down. The page still exists. Oh wait, hold on a second. All right, let me refresh and then shut the server down. I had to refresh because I updated the front end code. Okay, so now I've shut the server down, and so it's gonna fail when I press this button. Right here on line 20, I actually caught the error and I logged this information. So as a developer, I can see this, but the user would never see this if there was some problem with the request. So let me start the server back up, so we'll reload this. And so if there's an error, so catch is a way to say like if else, or like if else, or if else, else. So like something has failed completely in the back end. We don't know what it is, and I'm just gonna update the color. I'll just make it black, and just so we know. All right, so it's working. And then suddenly something happens, the network goes down, it's not working anymore. The user presses it, you still can do something in your app, even if it doesn't work. And that's where catch or try catch also can do the same thing. It's basically a way to add logic if something breaks on the back end. So yeah, so just a recap, we used Express Generator, where we didn't really mess with any of their stuff, except we modified we added a button to the index, we added a JavaScript to the layout, we added a new API series of routes with this color function, and then we added some simple code on the front end to get this color. And so it's important to just remember that like the public is the static. These are just static files for your for your website. And any dynamic files are going to be rendered on the back end. But they can still, even though they're rendered on the back end, they can still access all the files inside of public. All right. Any questions about any of this?
Wait, what were you saying earlier about like you wouldn't be able to host this on GitHub?
Yeah, so any site, so GitHub won't run server-side code for you. So you couldn't host this on GitHub because GitHub will only host static websites. Yeah. And so if you're following either of the books, they're both using React, and you can use React and another project called Gatsby to take your React project and render it a series of static files from it. It allows you to have a dynamic site with tools and a database, but then render a static one and host it cheaply on GitHub. But if you have any kind of backend, databases, you're contacting APIs, you have some kind of you're storing data, like your project where you're storing data that people are submitting, that requires the backend. That requires code running on a server to store that information, so that information is available to everybody else that goes to the same website. So that's going to have to be a backend. But you can do all that with Vercel. Yeah, and I can show you all how to publish that. It's really easy. There's a 5-minute tutorial that I can send you to as well. But yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, if there are no more questions, I'm going to hit stop on the record button and I'll post this.